of Ha'ala, level of elevation, the level of fire. The Nesachim is the idea of Yerida and Amshach Lamata. And the same way, there is the level of the Hamshacha, the Ha'ala of Kriya Shema, and there's the level of Hamshacha of Tefillin. And that's why we're going to explain, we're holding the explaining what's the association that we say. Whoever reads Kriya Shema without putting on Tefillin, it's as if he was bringing a carbon without the Nesach. So to explain that, he's starting to go into the whole idea of davening and Kriya Shema, about Shema Yisrael, and he was going into the need for all the levels and all the things we need to go through until we finally reach the level of Shema Yisrael. There's the level of the Hizbonus before davening, and there's the level of the Psukkah de Zimra, and there's a level of the Birchas Krishma. Then we start speaking about the Pasuk Shema Yisrael Avay Elokeinu Avay Echad, that it's necessary to gather in together all of our koiches and be mashpia on both our nefesh elokis and our nefesh habamis, thanks to the Birchas Krishma that speak to both that we spoke about. Then we bring down that Havaya is Elokeinu, that the level of Havaya, which is higher than say the Shal Soiva, comes down, becomes our chayas in such a way that goes down without any types of intermediaries. And now we're going to conclude with the end of the part in Kriya Shema, which is Havaya Echad, and then how it goes further. Zelsh Messiah, top of page Yud Gimel, this is what he concludes. Havaya Echad, the level of the one Havaya. What does that mean? Shekol Ritzayim, the entire will and desire of the person is Ein El Havaya Echad Bolvat, only Havaya Echad, that all he wants, all his connection is, his entire being is just the oneness of Hashem. And then after we get through the first pasuk of Krishma, all of this foil exhalate effects by him that should be you should love him by your God with all your heart, with all your soul. That is how he is transformed in the process. From this comes out also in the second parsha of Kriya Shema. Also, when the person is in such a state and situation that he has a connection with matters of the world, aspects of the world have some type, he engages with it. Like it says, you are gathering your grains. Rehu Margish, still in all, despite the fact that he's engaging with the world, he feels the possibility. Maybe your heart will be seduced and convinced. Mamish is actually equal. That you will turn and you will serve other gods. In other words, it says in Kriya Shema, it will be if your heart will convince you, talk you into, etc., and you will turn and you will serve other gods. So the Rebbe is going to explain like this: there are two ways to look at this. The simple way is, first there's your heart becomes seduced, then you're turning, then you're serving other gods. The Chassidus approach is that as soon as you are turning to something that's not Hashem, that's already a level of serving other gods. So the point that he's saying over here now is that a person can be so in tune with Hashem that even while he's vasafta de ganech, even while he's engaging in physical matters, he still is aware and conscious of the fact that any slight turn and any slight seduction is already like avodah zarah. This is what the Rebbe is going to say now. Line 9. Hainum, this means when his heart is only leaning and turning. The heart is just giving a small move, Melikus, from godliness. It's like turning away and serving Chas v'Shalom idol worship. The truth is, this concept is not so wild, because the Alter Rebbe right away in Tanya, from Perek Yud Ches and Yutes, explains that since a Yid is like the idea of Avodah Zarah is completely out of the question for a Yid, therefore anything that is going against Hashem's will is essentially like Avodah Zarah, and the person should be fearful of not doing that thing in the same way as he'd be avoiding Avodah Zarah. So he says in line 12, he says the distinction that happens concerning this attitude before the process of Kriyashma versus after. Before a person reciting Shema Yisrael, the path of a person is straight in his own eyes. It could be that he's truly straight. In other words, before one reads Kriyashma, a person can think of themselves, I am doing things right. I'm on the right path. I am, if not self-congratulatory, at least I feel myself, I'm doing what I should be doing. The Rebbe says, could be he's correct, could be it's not that he's actually lacking anything. It says in line 14, after you reach the recognition and the feeling that there's one, that the level is Havaya Echad, there's only Hashem. Hashem is in everything and present in everything. We know someone that makes a signal with his hand in front of the king. In other words, he's not doing anything major wrong, but he's showing some type of independence by signaling in the air, making a circle in the air with his finger. That is already considered rebellion with all of the consequences associated with it. So therefore, the same thing when a person reads Kriya Shema and he recognizes Havaya Echad. So what was previously what he looked at himself as being very straight person, a very direct and good type of avodah, now he realizes that a little movement off. That's something that if he turns his heart, if his heart becomes a little bit seduced and convinced of something that is not completely in concert with Hashem, so then it's completely equal in his mind, like turning away and doing idolatry. This means that before reciting Kriya Shema, when he still was not yet in the presence of the king, the idea of that maybe you'll be convinced, and the idea of turning away and the resulting Avodah Zarah, this is really two distinct things, because there's these different levels. I only did this much, not that much. When a person is aware and feels that there is only one God, therefore become for him the feeling that you shall love Hashem your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. So then there's no difference between just a small, he's been convinced, or actually turning away. Nimtza comes out to close in the Kriya Shema Ho'inyan Ha'Law V'Yitzim Megeder HaKel. The general idea of Kriya Shema is the ascent and going out of the entire category of being clothed in and limited by vessels, which is the point that he mentioned before. I didn't mention this in my review, my summary. Now he says at the top of page Yud Beis, the conclusion of this entire idea. It's about not being contained. It's about Shinyonim Mu'allah, it's the idea of elevation. All of what we just now described about Kriya Shema, the level of Shema Yisrael, the level of Havaya Elokeinu, the level of Havaya Echad, the level of Ahavta, V'Sartem, and so on. All of this is about not being contained in vessels. when something is not contained in vessels, that's like a fire. That's like the fire that's trying to tear away from the limitations of this earth. So everything that we've been talking about up till now about davening, starting from his abundance before davening, so the Zimra, Birchas Kriyashma, the term Shema, the term Yisrael, the term Havaya Lekenu, the term Havaya Echad, V'ahavta, until Pen Yiftal Avavkim V'sartam Avatam. All of this is all about elevation and ascent. Now, the other side of it, the Nesachim type of idea, Amnam film in Yanam, but the idea of film is about drawing down. The Inyanat film, the idea of film is that these very parches of Kriyashma, that one recites the speech, and obviously one is also thinking what they are reciting in speech. They should be drawn down also in written letters with physical ink upon physical parchment. So film is just the opposite, taking these lofty ideas and drawing down this Havaya Echad, this recognition, down here below into the physical world. So that is the goal and the purpose and the intention, to bring it down into this world, to bring it down into our world, just like the Nesach. Now the Rebbe says this idea of Kriya Shema versus Tefillin is actually reflected in davening itself. In davening itself, we have the Kriya Shema aspect of davening, which is Halah, and then Shemoneh Esrei, which is similar to Tefillin, which is bringing it down. I'll skip line 7. After the ascent of Kriya Shema, we say of Hilas, the bracha of bench, our crops, and so on. And what's the idea of davening? The idea of davening, when we're asking for requests of physical needs, we often preface it not in Shemoneh Esrei, but in other parts, bracketing Shemoneh Esrei. We say Yehi Ratzon, it should be the will. What does that mean? It should be the will, making a will of Hashem. That a new will should come down from Hashem. That this new will should bring about, that he should heal the sick, and he should bench the crops, the years, the agriculture. That's the idea of drawing it down here below into the physical world, taking that unbelievably high new will and impacting the physical world, just like film is about taking the lofty ideas of Krishna and writing it with ink on parchment. This is what Chazal said. Film, that the entire Torah was compared to Tefillin. It's referring also to the mitzvahs of Torah. It's not just the study of Torah is likened to film, but all the mitzvahs of Torah is likened to film. Why? Because we just now explained that the message of film, as opposed to Kriya Shema, is about bringing things down below. Because all the mitzvahs, the main point, the main goal is drawing down here below into our world. Okay, now he's going to explain this in connection with the original question of the Maimer. Original question of the Maimer, we asked, why are we linking the mitzvah of Nesach to when the Yidden come into Eretz Yisrael and when they're settled in Eretz Yisrael? Why is the mitzvah of Nesachim limited in some fashion in the Midbar? And like we mentioned, there's different types of limitations of the Nesachim in the Midbar. But essentially, whatever way, according to whichever opinion, either there was no Nesachim whatsoever, or there was limited Nesachim, because it's about bringing down into the world. Line 16, Ois Hey. That's what it says when you will come to the land of your settling. First of all, the obligation of Nesachim is Eretz Yisrael, and that itself, only after inheriting and settling specifically That's why it says Mosboteichem, like we said. It's not immediately when they arrived in Eretz Yisrael, but only after they divided the land and after they inherited the land and where everybody was settled. As opposed to in the midbar in the wilderness was only the idea of the korbanos. Because the idea of the wilderness is the opposite of being settled and drawing down into this world. It's the opposite of coming down. It's about rising up. That's the idea that the wilderness is called a thirsting place, that there is no water in it. What's the significance of the lack of water in the midbar? The Inyan Hamayim, because the idea of water, water descends from a high place to a low place, like this always brings down. Uhamshach is the idea of drawing down. The Ilu midbar in Yadeh, as opposed to midbar, it's about ascent and elevation, and it's not about drawing down. Therefore, it's lacking water. One could even say it's also associated with heat. Heat has to do with fire, with age, going upwards. And here he brings very, very shortly the part that we mentioned in the beginning or earlier in the Maimer, that I wasn't sure that the Maimer mentioned because it was like a one-liner over here. The connection with the Chet HaMaragim. So he says in line 23, this idea, this concept of not being connected with the world and not wanting to connect with the world was the complaint to the Maraglim that didn't want to enter Eretz Yisrael. They were complaining and they were saying that it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. Why did they say so? Because they didn't want to engage and deal with the Hamshachim al-Mailamata. They wanted to be specifically in a state of ascent and elevation. Since the midbar is in a state of ascent and elevation, therefore, there weren't the idea of the nesachim, the level of the libations, the pouring of the wine, and like we said, that goes down to the depth of the earth. The idea of the nesachim is the idea of going drawing down. When they came into Eretz Yisrael, and not just they came to Eretz Yisrael, after inheriting and settling it, it became the land of your settlements, in a way of being settled also spiritually. In the individual avoid of every single one, just like physically, materially, every single one after the inheriting the land and of the settling of the land. It meant that every single person had his place. So too in the spiritual avoid of entering Eretz Yisrael, it's about every person being settled in the avoid of pratis, that they're dealing with the world and coming down into the world. Then was necessary to be the idea of the libations. Close, who the general idea of this is, why then this order? Why karbanis then nesachim? If nesachim is the whole purpose, go straight to nesachim. If Eretz Yisrael is the whole purpose, go straight into Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure Hashem could have found all different types of ways what to do with Matan Torah, how to get them from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. It's not a problem for Hashem. Why the necessity spiritually, and that's why it happened physically, of Midbar before Eretz Yisrael, and also why is there also the need of Karbanis along with Nesachim? Let's just have Nesachim alone. For that matter, why Krishma along with the Tefillin? Let Tefillin be alone. Why Krishma before Shemoneh Esrei? Let it be just Shemoneh Esrei. So he explains in line 30, you closely, and who the general idea of this is, so that you'll be able to be the idea of drawing down into the world and impacting the world and transforming the world. So that the first has to be the idea of ascent and elevation. Top of page Tesvav, initially the Yidden were in the Midbar, it's the idea of ascent and elevation. But that's not the purpose. This is not the ultimate purpose. Rather, the purpose is in coming down. That is accomplished in entering the land. And we see this tension, if you will, in everything in Yiddishkeit. A person learns in yeshiva, but the Rebbe doesn't want the person to stay in yeshiva all of his life. He's married, goes to kollel for a year at least, and then that prepares him, that sets up the foundation that afterwards he can enter into the world and transform the world. One day only is Shabbos. Then there's 6 days of the week. The Shabbos is to prepare for those 6 days. 1 year is Shemitah, to prepare for all the 6 other years that we work the land. Always that type of tension and preparation of one building off the other. Line 3 on page as well. This is also what it says in the pasuk. I desired kindness and not karbonis. That's what the Navi bemoans the fact that the Yidden think, and it says in Hosea that the Yidden think that they'll bring a lot of karbonis and they'll be taken care of, they'll be in Hashem's good graces. So the truth, so the Hosea told them, Hashem desires kindness, not a korban. What does that mean? Hashem specifically, in addition to kindness, in addition to commanding us and telling us in the Torah to do tzedakah, there is a whole sefer Vayikra that deals with karbanis. What's it mean? Chesed chafatzti v'lo zeva. So Chassidus explains, it doesn't say the Eibusher doesn't want karbanis. It says desire. Desire is the inner will, the ultimate purpose. Let's explain to my father-in-law, the Friedrich Rebbe. It's the idea of desire. Chafatzti says that chesed chafatzti v'lo zeva. My desire, who pnimius harotzen, is the inner part of the will. It's higher than the rotzen. An ordinary rotzen, that's the external part of the rotzen. We know that pnimius harotzen and chetzonius harotzen is like the goal versus what brings me to the goal. So I want to go to work. Why do I want to go to work? I want to go to work, so I should be able to eat. So the chitzonius harotzen, I'm not talking about that he doesn't want to go to work. I want to go to work. But the pnimius harotzen is the food that I'm going to eat. And I can only eat food if I go to work and I have the money to pay for the food. So I want the work, but there is a goal that is after that. And because of that goal that is after that, so the chitzonius harotzen is the wanting to work. The pnimius harotzen is the food that I'm getting. The same thing. It's not that Hashem chas v'shalom doesn't want karbanos, but he wants it, but for a different purpose. Like the midbar was a preparation for Eretz Yisrael. The karbanos is a preparation for the nesach. So he says in line 9, the hainu tachlis amachuv, the ultimate purpose and intent, who chesed dafke, specifically chesed. The idea behind it is of chesed, is drawing down from above to below. That's chesed. Chesed goes, someone that is greater and has more gives to one that has less. The loy zevach or loy zavach, not the idea of karbonis to Allah, that's the ascent from below to above. Vahainu, this means the option, but though initially there has to be the ascent and the elevation. Prior to the Nesachim, and also in order, like we say, it has to first be the midbar, then it has to be Kol Makim, Ein Zachayfetz. It doesn't fall into the category of desire, even Shein Tachlis, because that is not the purpose and the goal. Ela Tachlis, he Dafke Chesed, the goal is specifically kindness. That's the idea of drawing down. And specifically the drawing down very much below. Until there's such a place that's nothing beneath it, like we said before about the Tahoim, that the holes in the ground by the Mizbeach, where the Nesachim were poured into, went all the way down to the aquifer, the lowest place possible. That's a true idea of kindness. When the drawing down below is only to someone that is on the person's level. There is different levels of chesed. I can give chesed to someone, but that person is more or less in the same level like me. Ein za chesed la mitosoi. It's not the true idea of kindness. The true idea of kindness is da'avke kisham shochi b'cholam adregis alamatam matam. It's only when the Amshach is in all levels to the lowest of the low. This is proven from Avram Avinu that he was a man of kindness. That's why he gave also to the Arabs, that it says over there, that they even bow down to the dust upon their feet. So in other words, while we look in Yiddishkeit for the epitome of chesed, of kindness, we look to Avraham Avinu. His kindness went so far. In other places here he doesn't mention it. In other places he mentions he wasn't just kind to his own kind, but he was kind to Arabs. And first of all, they were Avodah Zarah, Shlishtachavu, that in other places points out. And not only did they serve Avodah Zarah, but they served Avodah Zarah that was to the dust. And it was on their feet. So it was the lowest of the lowest of the lowest type of thing they served. And still, Avraham Avinu was mashpeach chesed. That is the true idea of chesed. Chesed is how low it reaches. Now, concerning this, it says, Ki chesed chafatzti, my inner desire, my pnimius aratzon, my true desire is kindness. That's the goal. Therefore, he did not remain in the midbar despite all the great and unbelievable qualities of being in the midbar, as we will talk hopefully in tomorrow's mind. Rather, they entered Eretz Yisrael. When they entered Eretz Yisrael, especially after inheriting and settling Eretz Yisrael, they became obligated in Nisachim. Because the ultimate goal is to make a home for Hashem down here below, which is not through Karbanos alone and not through wilderness alone, but specifically through coming into Eretz Yisrael and settling it and bringing the Nesach. By the way, just an interesting aside, the way Chassidus and the way the Rebbe turned something around on its head, as if to say, Karbanis is definitely one of the most central aspects of Yiddishkeit, to such a degree that before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, it was unimaginable how Yiddishkeit can even exist without Karbanis. Karbanis is like the most central thing. In the Karbanis, we would have thought the actual bringing of the animal on the Mizbeach with it, sprinkling the blood and all that entailed, that is the central part. Nesachim, when we learn about it, seems like, okay, one more thing that's done along with Karban. They had to do the libation. When we learn this Maimer, the entire idea of Karbanis gets turned on its head. You want to know what the main part of the carbon is? You want to know what the purpose and the goal of the Karbanis is? It's not the Karbanis itself. It's that seemingly minor point of the Karbanis, the level of Nesachim. That's the main thing. And in a similar vein, we could take it concerning Kriya Shema versus Tefillin. Says whoever reads Kriya Shema without putting on Tefillin, he's made Eidos Sheker B'atzmo. He's testifying falsely about himself. So in other words, like this, the main thing is the Kriya Shema, but you got to have the Tefillin so you don't testify falsely. No, that's not the point. Don't think that the holiness and the elevation and the spirituality of Kriya Shema is what it's all about. All of that holiness, that spirituality, and the Hashem Echad, and the union with Hashem, and the complete joining with godliness, it's about putting on tefillin. It's about doing the mitzvah begashmis. This is, in a way, counter to a lot of spiritual movements that have been popular in Judaism. That was all about finding the spirituality in Judaism at the expense of actually doing the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the main thing. All those spiritual experiences are to enable us to do the mitzvah and to give the mitzvah the proper performance.